is Adam with the Warrior Guitar System, and welcome to the Flex Fingers Guitar Training Mini Course. I'm really glad you made it because I've been wanting to show you this stuff for a while. Hey, have you ever wondered why your guitar playing skills are as flat and as dead as roadkill? Some of the biggest complaints that I get from new students relates to their inability to play certain songs. They have a difficulty switching between complex guitar chords, and they have low confidence when playing any kind of intricate guitar licks. Today, I want to show you two simple and straightforward strategies that are so powerful you'll never struggle with these issues again. The root cause for these types of issues almost always comes from one of the four following areas. 1. Lack of strength in one or more fingers of the fretting hand. 2. Poor dexterity. 3. Inadequate flexibility. And or number 4, low endurance. Hey, good news is, in just a moment, I'm going to show you these strategies that will tackle all 4 of these causes simultaneously. What that means for you is that you'll be able to play with greater comfort, control, and precision when tackling any song, any chord, any scale, and any technique. The best part is that it's something that you can apply and integrate into your practicing right away. So, if you're ready, I'm ready, let's go. First things first, there's a couple things that I need you to tackle before we get into the strategies. The first thing I want you to do is take a moment and do a full upper body stretch. Yep, that's right. Do a full upper body stretch. The same kind of stretch that you would do before going to the gym or playing any kind of sports. That means stretching out your back, your chest, your shoulders, triceps, forearms, etc. Now you might be sitting there going, why the hell do you want me to do that? Well, obviously, stretching is going to make you more flexible and loose for the task at hand, but it also will help you become more mentally focused. In fact, it's so important that I highly recommend you do it every day before picking up the guitar. Trust me, it'll make things a whole hell of a lot easier for you. So, take a minute, pause the video, do it now. Next, if you haven't already done so, go ahead and grab your guitar so you can follow along with me while we go through these exercises. Before we start though, please make sure your guitar is in tune. Hey, look, I'm in standard tuning, which means you should be in standard tuning. So if you need to, go ahead, pause the video, get tuned up, and I'll see you in a minute. All right, so before we dive into this, let me go over a few tips that are going to make things a lot easier for you. Tip number 1 is posture. Have some freaking pride, okay? I want you to really be proud of what you're doing right now and have some confidence. That involves using a good sitting posture. Get in a comfortable position, make sure you're sitting up as straight as you can, and keep the guitar tight against your body. If you're sitting, make sure you're in an armless chair or a stool instead of on your couch or in your bed. Actually, the best practice chairs are the simple fold-up style that you can get at most stores. They're inexpensive, obviously they're armless, and they put you at a good height off the ground to be comfortable throughout your practicing. If this isn't an option, you can consider standing. Tip number 2 is thumb position. Your thumb needs to be in different positions at different times depending on what you're playing. But for this exercise, the thumb should be about halfway behind the neck, applying some light pressure, but also being relaxed, something like this. Tip number 3 is wrist position. As with the thumb, your wrist tends to be in different positions at different times depending on what you're playing. The most common wrist positions look something like this. In a perfect world, your wrist position or your wrist should look more like this, with it slightly bent outward, giving you adequate arches in all the finger joints and promoting the use of your fingertips. Make sure you avoid wrist positions that look like this. These sorts of positions often lead to slouching and the use of the pads and sides of your fingers instead of the fingertips. It's just an overall bad habit that causes a lot of sound quality and tone issues. Tip number 4, use your fingertips. As I just mentioned, avoid using the pads or sides of your fingers. Your fingers will get in the way of each other and mute adjacent strings. You can also get the most direct force out onto the strings by using the tips of your fingers so you don't have to press down so hard. Tip number 5, don't bend the strings. This is a common mistake that guitar players make, especially while learning something new or playing something more challenging. Obviously, it affects the quality of the tone and causes the chord or whatever it is that you're playing to sound out of tune. This photo obviously is an exaggeration, but even the slightest bend could cause some big problems. Tip number 6, don't press too hard. A lot of guitarists tend to put way too much pressure on the strings trying to get them to sound right. This makes sense since in the beginning of your playing, you had to apply a lot of force to get the string to vibrate. But now that your hands are stronger and you've developed some calluses, you don't need to press so hard anymore. Pressing too hard causes fatigue in the hand and also shifts the pitch of the string, similar to what bending the string would do. Apply only enough pressure to make the string vibrate clearly and no more. Tip number 7, use a strap. Whether you're in a standing or sitting position, using a guitar strap will keep the guitar tight against your body and prevent you from having to hold it. It also allows you to go from a standing to a seated position pretty quickly. Finally, tip number 8, the picking hand. Today's training includes exercises targeted to the fretting hand. It really doesn't matter what your picking hand is doing, so any picking style can be used. To keep things simple, I recommend using simple downstrokes throughout. Hey, welcome back. Now that you're all stretched out and tuned up, we can get going. So without further ado, here we go. We're going to put our first finger on the 4th string of the 12th fret, like that. Leaving that first finger there, we're going to put our 2nd finger on the 13th fret of the 3rd string, like that. Leaving these 2 fingers where they are, we're going to put our 3rd finger right here on the 14th fret of the 2nd string. And finally, we're going to put our 4th finger on the 15th fret of the 1st string, just like that. Now, don't play anything yet, all right? Hold your horses. I want you to get a feel for how that feels, all right? I want you to get used to how that feels because you've probably never used this kind of playing position before. One thing, it's not a very nice sounding chord or anything, so you probably never used it. So get used to how it feels for just a second. Also, before you play it, I want you to become aware of any tension that you might be feeling in any part of your body right now, especially like in your neck or in your back or in your forearm, even in your hand. All right, because that tension is going to make it more difficult for you to play this thing. It's going to definitely fatigue you faster as well as slow your fingers down, the movements themselves. All right, so now let's go ahead and play this. It's important to note we're going to play this one string at a time, one note at a time. But unlike in arpeggio where you're only playing one note at a time and the notes in between are muted, we're going to let all these notes ring out and we're not going to move our hand from where it is. We're going to keep our fingers down on the fretboard. Make sense? So it's going to sound something like this. So here's the 4th string, 3rd string, 2nd string, and 1st string. Alright, obviously nothing to go bragging home about, right? It doesn't sound all that great. But notice how my fingers stayed in place and I did not do anything other than just pick the notes. And I'm using downstrokes with my pick just for the sake of keeping it simple. If you're not able to hit all the notes or some of the notes sound dead or they're not ringing clearly, don't worry about that right now. What we're really concerned with is the way that this hand position feels as well as the overall mechanics. We're not necessarily worried about execution just yet. All right, with a little bit of practice, that will become no problem for you. As long as you keep in mind the 8 tips that I gave you earlier on in the video, okay? All right, one more thing worth mentioning is that we're not strumming, okay? We're not strumming this thing like this. All right, that's not what we're doing. We want to play each string one at a time. Okay? All right, so we're good there. We're ready for the next move. So the next move, pretty straightforward, pretty simple. We're going to take our 1st finger and we're going to slide it over to the 11th fret. Okay? Sliding it over to the 11th fret of the 4th string, leaving the other 3 fingers where they were, 13th fret, 14th fret, 15th fret. Okay? So what's important here is that you arch the joints of your finger. Okay? That way you're using the tips of the finger and that the pads of your finger won't get in the way of the strings below. Again, keep in mind those 8 tips that I gave earlier with thumb position, wrist position, and posture and all that stuff. Also, make sure you're not bending the strings like that when playing it, because check it out. It sounds a lot worse when you do it that way, okay? So here's the next move. You're going to pick it the exact same way. Just downstroke 1, 2, 3, 4, just like that. All right, here we go. Okay, not much better sounding. as far as tonality is concerned, but you know, it's functional nevertheless. So same thing. Remember to go slow. We're not racing here. We're not trying to win anything. So, you know, we want to make sure that we're going slow, taking our time, making sure that we're executing everything properly. Again, don't worry so much about whether or not the notes are clear. All right? That's not important right now. Just focus on playing. So let's recap what we just did. We started here, 12th fret, 13th fret, 14th fret, 15th fret. And now we moved over our first finger over to the 11th fret. So we have 11, 13, 14, 15. Okay. We're good there. So the next move is we're going to take our second finger and slide it over to the 12th fret. We're going to leave finger 1 where it is, finger 2 moved to the 12th fret, finger 3 and 4 stayed where they were. So now we have 11, 12, 14, 15. 11, 12, 14, 15. Make sense? Same thing, downstroke with the pick, just like this. All right. All right, so right now this probably maybe starting to feel a little bit of a burn there, all right, but still in good shape. So as you see now we have a gap, a half step, a full fret between the second finger and the third finger. All right, the next move follows the first two, where now we're going to take our third finger and slide it over to the 13th fret. And now we have a fret gap, a full fret gap between fingers 3 and 4. So finger 1 is now on the 11th fret, 2 is now on the 12th, 3 is on the 13th, 4 is still on the 15th. Again, same thing. We want to play the notes as clearly as we can, all right? We don't want to bend the strings, and we don't want to inadvertently, you know, be pressing down too hard, because it really messes up the sound when you do that. So here we go, same deal, downstroke, one note at a time. Okay. All right. Good. Good job, guys. All right. Finally, what we're going to do is we're going to take our fourth finger and move it over a fret. So now we have 11, 12, 13, 14. And essentially now we're back in the starting position, only a half step down. Okay? So we started here. We started here in this position, and we went like this, then we went like that, then like that, then like this. Good to go? All right, so what we want to do next is just keep working through doing the same exact thing. That's why I said it didn't really matter where we started as far as frets are concerned. So if you're on a large acoustic guitar, it doesn't really matter if you're on the 12th fret or not. It's just a little easier when you're on those more narrow frets, right? But anyway, so now you're on 11, 12, 13, and 14th fret. And what I want you to do now is practice going through that a few more times in the same way. So we're going to go now 11, 12, 13, and 14. Then we're going to slide over 10, 12, 13, and 14. Then we're going to go 11, 10, 11, 13, and 14. Sliding the third finger over, we're going to go now 10, 11, 12, 14. And then bring the little finger, fourth finger over to the 13th fret, and now we have 10, 11, 12, and 13. Back in that starting position. Then we can keep working through it a few more times. Okay? Now when it starts getting really difficult, maybe you start feeling some pain or some burning or some tightness in your hand, it's time to stop. Take a break, shake it out, stretch it out, etc. Okay? You don't want to hurt yourself. You actually can hurt yourself if you're not careful. So let's not go too crazy with this. It's also important to go slow. I kind of went through it kind of quick just now just to show you what was going on, but take it slow. This is not a rush. The whole point here is we're building strength, dexterity, endurance, and flexibility, right? So if we rush through this, it's not going to really do much for us, right? So we need to make sure that we're going slow. Which brings me to the next point. We're going to introduce now the use of a metronome. All right, now it's time to introduce the metronome to the mix. If you don't have one, that's all right, because you can get one through many of the free apps that are available now, or you can download one on the computer. If you don't know how to use one, don't sweat that either, because you can always go online and find some tutorials through YouTube or through a blog or what have you. I've got my metronome set to 60 beats per minute. That's 1 click per second, and that's going to keep us in the stretch for a pretty decent amount of time per finger. All right. Again, the idea here is to go slow. If you're not ready for the metronome yet, don't use one yet. If you're still trying to make the notes sound clear and you're still trying to switch without your fingers following each other, you don't need to put the metronome on just yet. All right, because that's something, especially if you're more of a beginner or lower level intermediate player, your fingers are going to automatically tend to start following each other. All right, and we haven't built up that finger independence yet. So work on that first before introducing the metronome. The metronome really does add a little bit more of a challenge to the mix, because it kind of puts a little bit of pressure on you to go. And it's also good practice now to make sure that your left and your right hands are synchronized so that they're hitting the right string right there on the click. All right, like I said, mine's set for 60 beats per minute. If you're ready, I'm ready. Let's go. All right, I'm going to start back in the starting position on the 12th fret, and we'll just go through a couple of times with the metronome. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, you did a great job. You're working it through with the metronome, the stretches are becoming easier, and the notes are starting to sound clear. If that's not the case, work at it for a while. It might take you a week or 2 or 3, maybe a month. It might take a couple months. But be patient with yourself, work through it, spend about 2 to 3 minutes a day going through that before you practice any other material. It's going to help you big time, and it's going to make all of the rest of the stuff that you play so much easier. Now, since you're becoming more comfortable with this, I think it's time that we move on to a more advanced version. So let's get to that right now. All right, here we go. Here's the last part right here. This is going to be a little bit more awkward feeling than the first one. So if you had trouble with the first one, don't worry about this one yet. Wait a little while before you start it. But essentially what we're going to do is a mirror image of what we had before. So originally we had this, right? On 12, 13, 14, 15. Now we're going to have something like this, where we're on 15, 14, 13, 12. All right. Now this happens to be a nicer sounding chord. It's actually a major 7 chord. Like I said, it's going to be a little bit more awkward though, all right, because it has your wrists kind of all screwed up, and you know, it's going to be difficult to be in a more forward wrist position. Your wrists will have to come back towards you some for this to work, and the thumb will have to come higher up on the neck than we had before. All right, so here we go. Same deal. 4 string. So we're going to go 4 string, 3rd string, 2nd string, 1st string, and the frets are 15, 14, 13, 12. All right. Next, we're going to move the first finger over 1, and now there's a gap between fingers 2 and 1. Not as pretty sounding anymore, right? Now we're going to go move the 2nd finger over 1 to the 12th fret. So now we have 15, 14, 12, 11. And you can't see it really, but there's a gap, you know, the half-step gap between my 3rd finger and 2nd finger. Again, you want to make sure the notes are sounding clear. All right. Next, move the 3rd finger over 1. This is going to be probably the most challenging part for you. And again, you want to make sure you're using the tips of your fingers here. Finally, move the 4th finger over. All right, then you can just go ahead and do that on the next set. Etc. Once you are more comfortable with that, you can go ahead and introduce the metronome to that as well. Again, 60 beats per minute, no more. Hey, congratulations. You have come a long way from the beginning of this video, but to be honest, you've barely scratched the surface. There's so much more we can do with stretches like this to become even more flexible and become stronger. But in the meantime, I have a challenge for you that I want you to start immediately. I want you to take some musical item, whether it's an arpeggio, a scale, a chord, a song, a technique, whatever it is, that either you've been procrastinating to learn because you feel like it's outside of your skill level, or you tried learning it in the past but just couldn't do it. I want you to try those things right now, using the same tips and strategies and tactics that we learned today. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised just how much easier these things are now that you're armed with better information, better techniques, and better strategies to get it done. Now, if you're a real motivated hard charger, I invite you to log on to www.warriorguitarsystem.com/results to get access to the secret weapon to unlocking your full guitar playing potential in the shortest possible time. You'll learn to play with the maximum effectiveness using this secret weapon. If you want to become an extraordinary guitar player, hey, I invite you to do that right now. But that's all the time I got. I really enjoyed being here with you today. I hope you did as well. I hope you got something out of this. Please leave your questions and comments. You can email me at adam@warriorguitarsystem.com. And until next time, keep on keeping on.